Welcome back. Sethikus, Boza, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame, Healing Arts, Occult Science. And for this specific segment, this is going to be a part 2, drawing the circle of the magician. I have got many inquiries in terms of how to utilize the circle based upon part 1, which is going to be linked in the description below, and it's going to be a part 2 in terms of taking things deeper to a lot of the concepts that I have applied to my own existence and personal practice that I'm going to be sharing with you in this specific segment. Now, when dealing with the concept of ceremonial magic, again, I must make note on here in terms of this platform that I am not in the business of invocation. I am not in the business of conjuring or incantations when it comes to the practice of drawing the circle of the magician. As to many reports out there in teaching to these things when it comes to ceremonial magic, I am not a ceremonial magician to any of that shit. In fact, when you come to the place of realizing that everything in ceremony is meant to be an extension of your own consciousness, you're not going to be fucking around with any of those things in terms of practice. And see, here with all of this, when you realize that you yourself are the ritual in light of becoming, if doing an actual ritual to things, which all of that encompasses, assists you in actualizing what is there as a focal point, by all means you can do that. But never, under no uncertain terms, am I going to advocate the practice of invocation, the practice of conjuring, and doing incantations in context to spirits, entities, alien factions, or whatever the fuck else people think they're going to be able to control in terms of ceremonial magic. And in order to see past all of these things, realize again that all is within. All that you actualize here is from within your own spirit, and must be awakened and come into a place of maturity in terms of this ritual and what it is really all about in terms of protocol. And see the goal within the fulcrum. As you and your life are the ritual, it is ever unfolding. And sure, the flux of life and what can happen also indicates that we are not always going to be in the fulcrum of ritual. But the more you do this, the more powerful it becomes. The goal of where I have been taking things over the years is again to bring things back to the original teaching, and is to remind the listener and those that have been initiated that again, you yourself have your own eternal spirit that is there within the core in context to actualizing the true power of the circle of the magician in connection to the higher force and the core of who you are in terms of grid works of consciousness that are beyond all of this other fucking bullshit that people come into in terms of the occult. I'm talking about grid works of consciousness when it comes to sound, energy, frequency, and vibration, far beyond the lockdown equation, let alone anything that is going to fuel line the upper and lower astral grid works in terms of spirits. What we are working with is sound, consciousness, energy, frequency, and vibration, not spirits. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have interface with other spirits to all of the fuckery that's going on. Note, again, you have your own eternal spirit to actualize to this segment. Now, taking things a bit deeper in terms of what I've already presented public with things to draw in the circle. This again is basically what things must come back to. Now, there are many ways that we can utilize the circle and work with it. The most important, though, is what I just mentioned in context to this practice, but also training yourself to fortify your field and set forth intentions in alignment with that for the potential action to be taken with focused intention is one of the main things I want to touch upon at the start of this. Now, there are many instructions out there in terms of how to make a magic circle. Here, though, with how I am teaching this, it is what we declare and what we evoke from within ourselves, from the core, in connection to the higher force that takes the place of invocation, incantations, and conjuring. Again, if you want to fuck with spirits, you're pretty much on the trade out when it comes to your birthright as a human here in our reality field. And one thing I will say to archetypes in terms of the gods and goddesses, scrap what you think in context to religion. The gods and goddesses are not meant to be worshipped or bowed down to, although to the advent of religion is what certain spirits can take the form of fucking with the blood code codex. The fact is here, they are meant to be actualized to what is there within our codex when it comes to the ancestors. Now, as a warning to this specifically, depending on your lineage will also determine how to regulate this, knowing the difference. So the concept of assuming God form within the circle as it has been taught goes to what I'm saying here. You're not calling upon something outside of yourself, but lineage itself when it comes to things specifically to the codex. This is one of the main things that they are working to shut the fuck down in terms of the lockdown equation. The lockdown is a mathematical equation proven to exist. I've already exposed this and proven and is transcended when you do all of this correctly. Yes, you're going to go through the transformation process necessary here in order to actualize the codex. But it's not just the blood code, soul code codex that needs to be actualized, that needs to be ignited. The only way that's going to happen is if you make connection to the higher force in terms of integration of your eternal spirit first. It's not the other way around. And see, you've got to know this because it's a very, very important part of our evolution in terms of setting things back on course with everything that is still unfolding. And this in terms to which the circle of the magician is also designed to cleanse and purge, healing the ancestors. And in order to do that, one must stand within the true magic circle. And in terms of explanation, when it comes to esoteric symbolism, the circle is hardly ever given its significance. And this is why I've been working to reinstate this. And it's interesting because other people out there are starting to catch the fuck up. It's like, yep, I was not wrong about the things that I've been presenting and taking it to the universal laws of metaphysics and the eternal axioms. The true circle here represents the layout, again, of the macrocosm to the microcosm. That is the perfected individual and what it actually stands for and what is. And to that, there is no beginning and no end. It is the isness of being. And see, the circle of the magician, therefore, is a symbolic diagram of the eternal divinity in all of its aspects within the spectrums of infinity. Now, to that word, infinity, all it literally means is in time. And so to that which is beyond time and space expresses itself here in context on that spectrum. But if you get caught in context to being finite, then you are in the thralls of infinity and are not accessing eternity and that which is beyond the spectrums of triangulation. Did you hear what I just said? We must become true adepts to this in order to move into perfecting ourselves as true humans here in the reality field. The fact is, all day, every day, you are doing magic and you don't even fucking know it. We are magical beings, and seeing yourself taking your head out of the fantasy bullshit in trajectory when it comes to reality, you're going to be putting yourself into a place of realizing, 1, your magic is being used against you. 2, you forgot who the fuck you really are. 3, you must remember. And to embrace divinity in all of its aspects is not only to acknowledge this, but to see yourself through the eyes of the higher force. We must see ourselves through the eyes of the higher force, everyone. This is the lens. This is the spectrum. This is the true magic mirror. This is the true magic mirror gate that we must come into beyond the tests and the trials that we are going through in terms of facing the magic mirror gate. Because if you can embrace that, if you can embrace the flame, if you can embrace that purifying fire that comes in, you will eventually come to the place of actualizing what I'm talking about here. Now, to actualize this in context to drawing the circle means that you become the symbol. You are the ritual. You are the sigil. And see yourself as being perfected. Here it's to note that nothing is perfect to this pathwork. We are in the process of being perfected. And to this progression, this needs to become the standard. And to break through every fucking wall that is there in order to actualize who we are in the face of that which would tear away the birthright of our kind. First, it is to contact the macrocosm in our highest step of consciousness, training ourselves to master the spirals of creation. Again, with the first spiral creation, the solar spiral, bridging over to the galactic spirals, and eventually and potentially the universal spiral creation. You need to go back to the solar spiral and learn how to bridge over into the galactic. Stop skipping that. If you go into the galactic spirals and all this other fucking crap, it's no wonder we are where we are still. So take it back to the foundation. Take it back to protocol. And again, the circle itself is the symbol of the three spirals of creation, among many other things. And working this correctly is to move away from that triangulated distortion in terms of what traps sound, consciousness, energy, frequency, and vibration, which locks down our physicality into those lower and upper astral fucking grid works and all that etheric fucking bullshit. Most of what we are dealing with physically is an etheric issue. I don't know how many times I've had to say this over and over and over and over again. And in terms of the codex and what is meant to actualize itself from the core essence of who we are, a lot of that overlay and triangulated distortion, again, in terms of what traps sound, consciousness, energy, frequency, and vibration, when you use the circle, let alone taking it out of the equation altogether in terms of your personal practice. Again, I don't know how many times I have to explain the mechanics. When you take zero out of the equation, the manipulation of the spindle of your energy force is deregulated, and that's why you deal with all the issues and the fucking problems that you fucking do. But the moment you take into practice drawing the circle or the magician correctly is the moment that we as sages, that we as mystics, that we as magicians and shamans make connection with the divinity that is demonstrated graphically in terms of power. You can have all the knowledge and the information there is to know out there, but do you have power? It is the power source of the higher force to actualize the codex, to fire it up. You're not going to make it happen on your own. It doesn't work like that. And so deeper when the individual that comes into this in terms of their practice makes connection with the macrocosm, again on the first spiral of creation. The solar spiral is where we start to reach some of the highest steps of consciousness. Therefore, from the point of view of true magic, it is quite reasonable to assume that while standing in the center of the circle is equivalent to being in one's own consciousness, which brings us to that place of universal divinity. And from this, one can see clearly that the circle is not only a diagram for protection against malefic influences and forces and all this other fucking bullshit. Able to discern any sort of malefic influence. You have to discern whether it's for good or evil or whatever the fuck. For ourselves, in fact, symbolizing, and this is why making connection to what I'm saying here is so fucking important in terms of navigation. If you're in connection with that, you're going to be able to discern shit for real. You don't even get out of the gates in terms of the true path unless you have learned how to master drawing the circle. And by standing in the center of the circle, which then should be transforming into an actual sphere, you from this place become the cause, knowing how things work, and are now reaching beyond the grid works of consciousness of the dark rulers of this world and where the fuck they operate from, let alone the cohorts that they are in correspondence with on the other side of the first four veils that I exposed in Labyrinth of the Nine Veils Part 1. Here you are standing in your own power, knowing the difference. I've been sharing these things for years, and yes, those of you out there that have been taking these principles and applying them to your life, you've definitely got results. But I think about how many more people out there, if they just took this right here and started practicing this, the things that would happen for them would be a lot more than most of the fucking shit that people are getting into in terms of trying to decipher and what they're getting into in context to quote-unquote awakening. You can't even fucking awaken for real unless you do this. You just got a head full of knowledge and information, and you're all over the place. Again, we have to know how to throw energies correctly. And from this place, again, this is where we become the cause, knowing how things work, and are now reaching beyond the grid works of consciousness that the dark rulers of this world operate from. Standing in your power, knowing the difference. And to see ourselves as far less than who we truly are is a fucking disgrace. By doing so, you are basically caving into the programming and the state of mind that you have been conditioned to. It's all too clear that we are dealing with a totalitarian regime. But can you recognize that within yourself? See, the only thing that gives these bastards any sort of fucking power is the fact that you cannot overcome the totalitarian within yourself. And they fucking love that shit when you point the fucking finger instead of taking responsibility. And see, in the face of this is where we actualize our power, knowing the difference. So to not be caught in all of the nets, traps, and snares that are out there in order to confuse the fucking shit out of us, especially when it comes to the esoteric arts. Now, granted, there's going to be those out there that disagree with me in context. To that, though, I'm just going to direct you to history and ask you, has anything else worked so far? Has anything else worked? If it had, then we would not be in the position that we are still as humanity in context of what's being implemented. And our tactics need to evolve. Our tactics must evolve. Otherwise, you're going to remain in the triangulation of Jormungandr, all of that feedback loop fucking bullshit, when in fact you're giving your magic and your energy over to the agendas that they are rolling out for you to focus on. What the fuck? I see their tactics absolutely clear, which is why they laugh their fucking asses off at you instead of truly being afraid, because now you know the difference and you're not going to play into their tactics. Why? Because your tactics have evolved. Our tactics must evolve. And so the esoteric essence of the magus standing in the center of the circle is therefore quite different in terms of that which the books of evocation usually maintain. If you as the individual stand in the center of your circle and we're not conscious of the fact that you are at that moment symbolizing the higher force and eternity, we would not be able to practice any influence or be the cause point in any sort of way whatsoever. And see, that's the difference in terms of how I present things on this platform and also how I live my life. Again, what I'm talking about here in terms is becoming the cause point. The question is, though, what is your cause? Who are you? What is your purpose? What is your cause? What is your cause? What is your purpose? And see, here, in these instances, this is where the perfect magic can happen, because now you are thirsty to know. Now you want to know. So you got to understand something, that you, we are here to take back our position equivalent to the will force actualized from a place of true intelligence in connection to the higher force, not augmented intelligence. This has nothing to do with augmented intelligence. This has nothing to do with AI, but the true intelligence, which comes from the divine grid works of consciousness that are far, far, far beyond the lockdown Metatronic equation bullshit, along with other grid works that are laced out within the lower and the upper etheric realm. You must know your own power. You must know thyself. Why do most people get into the occult? Because they want power. And we need that power in terms of our connection to the higher force. But what most are taught, they are taught the circle in all of the inverted ways, again, in terms of conjuring, invocations, and incantations. Fuck all that shit. Now, if you use the magus in certain terms here, during such operation, in context of actualizing your position, moving through the process of healing, this is a part of the alchemical rites of initiation. If you don't have the right attitude towards what you're doing or what's going on, you're going to end up degrading yourself, and you're simply just going to be mimicking things. I'm not going to minimize anything here in terms of attacks or anything that we are moving through in terms of healing. But what is your attitude? What is your state of mind? I've had many mentors say to me that our attitude is going to determine our altitude. If you have a shitty attitude, if you have a shitty outlook, if you have a shitty way of perceiving, what do you think the result is going to be? Everything, again, it all goes back to the first cosmic law. We can all from time to time have a really shitty, fucked up attitude when it comes to a lot. I'll be the first one to admit it. But it's not so much the anger or the depression or the anxiety moving through these things. It's to know the difference here. Being able to transmute that shit and change your fucking attitude. You have to change your state of mind. You have to change the way that you are perceiving and not allow yourself to fall into apathy and indifference in who you truly are at the core. If that happens, that is the absolute worst thing that you can do, especially in terms of attacks, let alone healing through stuff. No, we have to take courage every single day. The word courage is in the word encourage. Encourage. We need to be in courage and not allow our vitality to be squandered. Giving yourself that validation when shit is caving in all around you. Again, we must see ourselves through the eyes of the higher force. This is the lens of perception that we must focus on. You can't mimic shit here. We have to be raw. We have to be real. And to our words, especially within the circle of the magician, we must be mindful of the words that we evoke. Look up the word attrition and see what it means. This is why we cannot relent when it comes to our attitude. Do not allow yourself to be worn the fuck down, but choose to evoke life. Choose to speak words of life and encouragement, and choose to feel past the inverted emotion that will suck you into the fucking void. Evoke the bridge and build the bridges. This is one of the things that I work to do within the circle of the magician when it comes to my own practice. We are here to build the bridges again and see again to this in any such case. If you're dealing with doubt and despair, again, it's easier said than done. If you are dealing with this, you're going to be in danger of losing control over your own faculties. You're going to be in danger of losing control over your mechanics. And is where all of this other shit is going to hook in on your ass. And is another reason why I don't fuck with spirits. Because of who the fuck I really am. One of the names of Odin is Yug, the terrifying one. And see, that's the thing. We need to become more terrifying than them. I don't know why everybody else is so fucking terrified. Maybe that's the shit inside of you that's actually terrified of Yug, which in terms goes back to Yggdrasil, the terrifying horse. That's another way of looking at the spindle, because when Odin is traveling the worlds, he's riding Sleipnir, slipping, navigating, moving past, not getting caught in all the nets, traps, and snares as he's going through the transformation, actualizing who he really is. Again, the archetype of the mystic of mystics, the sage of sages. And it's not to speak of other unwarranted and unforeseen shit that accompanies this phenomenon that has to be exposed for what the fuck it is. All of this fucking bullshit. And if it is true that there are inverted forces that are fucking with us, it's to know the difference. So when this shit happens, you don't fucking allow it. Now, taking it further in terms of the circle, the way that it is formed depends on the grade of maturity and individual attitude of the practitioner. In context to diagrams, there are many ways to create this from within yourself. Again, we are working with our actual codex here. That is the drawing by which divinity is expressed within the circle in terms of blood codes and soul codes in connection to your eternal spirit and the grid works of consciousness in terms of the higher force. Take it back to the three primal sound fields, the third energy, the Kundara, the blue flame. Many different ways to explain this in terms of symbolism, terms, and semantics. This is consciousness, again, coming into alignment. And the procedure when forming the circle is going to be different, say, with a Nordic practitioner like myself, and then, say, someone that is Strega. There are 12 original race lines. Within the 12, there are 4 primary races. Again, white dragon is of the north, red dragon is of the west, yellow dragon is of the east, and black dragon is of the south. Okay? Melanin, we all fucking have it. It's just a matter of accessing the codex here in alignment with the universal laws of metaphysics and the eternal axioms, knowing how to apply these things in action to our existence. It's for all people. But the way that you wield these things happens in terms of your codex. Everybody has a unique way. Again, at one time, we all sat at table with one another. So there is no division in terms of what I'm getting at here. Yet, who we are as individuals does express itself in a very unique way, which is why true magic is so fucking amazing to behold when it's actualized. Take it to the codex. It's to know your own mechanics here in context. And the construction of the circle depends on one's individual ideas to the inner knowing and the individual's conception of the qualities divine and what is to be symbolized graphically by the circle of the magician. This is the reason why a genuine magus will never draw a circle, will never carry out ritual or follow instructions concerning ceremonial magic to which themselves are not identified when it comes to the codex. But all of this to the pathwork initiations that are taking place. This is what it's all designed to do, so that certain things do fit when it comes to personal pathwork trajectory. So bearing all of these things in mind, it comes from a natural place from within the actualized core. We are all to make connection with the higher force. This is the power that fuels everything else in order to be activated, and the circle has to be drawn in concordance with the views of the life and the maturity of the practitioner. And see, the circle of the magician, this is groundwork. This is 101. You're going to keep coming back to this again and again and again and again in terms of the proper foundation. And you're not going to get out of the gates otherwise entering other gates unless you make this a part of your practice as an individual. The higher force is waiting to reveal itself and remind mankind with nature and the universe. See, polarity is there for a reason. It's there in order for us to know how to achieve harmony. Organizing chaos. This is what the fuck magic is all about. Not order out of chaos. Fucking bastards. Making use of the circle in the ways that I'm sharing here is going to be key. For this again is what represents the entirety of the universe and that which is beyond. Here, in our lives, in the reality field, manifesting in alignment. And there's a lot of shit that has happened this year that is not manifesting in alignment. But things that are, they're going to take you away from being key-coded into other universes that are nothing to do with this via the Metatron and the Weezadak in terms of chelantic science. I know what all of that fucking is. What is our focus? What is the trajectory that we need to focus on in order to burn out the fucking void, seal the rift, and bridge this fucking shit for real? We are bridgers. We are ambassadors, and we need to hold the right attitude in terms of who the fuck we are, no matter what the fuck we're dealing with. And see, I speak from a place of deep conviction, deep conviction. That's the difference with me. I have a conviction. It's not here or there. It's now. And so all of the bullshit that's nothing to do with our kind, again, we must know thyself. Okay? Again, this is coming from a place in terms of hardcore intelligence and a very deep conviction. And sometimes the wrong convictions can make men blind and drive them mad. It will go to devour their hearts and transform them into beasts. And what has any of that to do with our kind? To our convictions, but to the right convictions, awakening and actualization with the core intelligence, true intelligence. This is where we need to be coming at life from, knowing the difference. Once you start this, you have to see it through. There's no skipping around. The only way is through. And with that, we'll go ahead and take a break. Drawing the Circle of the Magician, Part 2. This is Sethikus, Boza, Black Earth Productions. I will be right back. Welcome back now from the break. This is Sethikus Boza, Black Earth Productions. Here to go deeper into Drawing the Circle, the Magician, Part 2. Whatever information or knowledge you have come into is not going to be able to be navigated effectively unless the gates of true intelligence are open to you. That's when that soul spark ignites. This is what happens within the circle, that soul spark igniting in terms of the internal dragon. We throw the circle, we do the ritual, we become the ritual, we are the ritual, we are the sigil. And if you want to create circles within circles, which is another way to identify the various codices that are there for you to work with so that you can differentiate and untangle and see how it all streamlines and connects so that the energy can flow in the correct way. And one must, of course, know how to meditate, thinking things on purpose, feeling into things on purpose with focused intention, and take the concept of the divine aspects in question into consideration when drawing the circle of the magician. The true magician must know that the divine names are symbolic designations of divine qualities and powers. Here it stands to reason that while drawing the circle and entering the divine names, the magician must also consider the analogies and the mythos corresponding to the powers in question. Things also to do with color, numerology, and direction also come into practice here. Take it to the arts and sciences, laying the proper foundation in terms of initiation. And see if you don't want to allow a breach in your own consciousness to come into existence, you must present these things in context with a complete analogy in terms of the mythos. And only from here can the new mythos be written. We're here to create the new, bringing things back to the original. Only from there can something new be created in hindsight. So each circle that is created with all of us, whether it is simple or complicated, it's always going to serve its purpose. And depending, of course, on the individual's faculty to bring your consciousness into full accordance with the universal laws of metaphysics and the eternal axioms. This is what actualizing cosmic consciousness is all about. Coming into accord with this, coming into alignment with this. And see, another question people ask me, creating the circle, you can use really anything as an idea for a project. Art. Art is also magic. Again, though, in terms of practice, it's all about your state of mind. And here is where you must convince yourself and be convinced that the circle is the center of which you stand representing the universe. Mid-guard, the middle yard. Upper, middle, and lower worlds. Everything is converging here. We are at the spearhead of evolution. So in order to respond correctly to this as a representation of the higher force itself, when you stand in the circle, the more that you do this, the more actualized it becomes from within yourself. And the more extensive your study and research, the greater your capacities for true intelligence are going to increase. And also your capacity to recall the storehouse of knowledge happens the more that one does this. The more complicated your rituals, again, coming from a place of simplicity, this will furnish the sufficient support of your spiritual consciousness, which then makes it possible and easier to connect to the microcosm and macrocosm within the center of your circle. As for the circle itself, the prevailing situation, the purpose, the possibilities and probabilities, no matter whether they are simple ones or whether they follow complicated systems of magics. And we need to be tapping into the true magic that is there. This is why the ancestors are awakening to try to remind us, because all of the overlay, distortion, fucking bullshit that people get into in terms of all of this, I know what I'm talking about here. Working in the open air, a magic weapon, dagger, or sword is something that I encourage to use for drawing the circle on the ground, carving that into the ground, into the dirt. When you're working in a room, the circle may be drawn on the floor with a piece of chalk. You can also use a large piece of paper, draw the circle that way. You can design it, again, make it into art. Or you can get your own circle made from cloth such as flannel or silk. If you can, in terms of embroidery, which is the most ideal, again, you want this to be a piece of art. And it's what I encourage if you're able to. Otherwise, remember that you yourself are the circle. You yourself are the ritual. You yourself are the sphere. You have to have the right attitude, an appropriate state of mind, and full concentration. These three are the most essential. Even when you have your silk circle embroidered, you have to practice drawing it to actualize the mind. You don't just step in and now all of a sudden you're connected. That's not how this works. And if a circle were drawn without the necessary concentration, it wouldn't be a magic one. It's just a fucking circle. Just because you draw a circle doesn't mean that it's charged with magic. Again, you must focus. Thought and emotion in alignment with true intelligence. The circle of the magician has to be worked. From there, if doing things in this capacity in context to ceremonial magic is something that you're going to do as an individual. Again, more advanced practitioners recognize the fact that they are the circle. So whether things are worked into a piece of cloth or silk, it still has to be drawn again symbolically with one's finger or a wand or some other magic weapon, again, as I've stated, using a dagger or a sword or a magical weapon that has been charged, that is not used for anything else as well. This also gives you the opportunity to focus and practice the very first assignments that you've been given if you took the initiation into the mystery school. And all of these things, again, they work one with the other and are highly effective, as stated by many that have come into these things themselves. Some of you have started your own platforms. So whatever divine faculties are going to be symbolized, again, furthermore, we must realize that it's not that drawing the circle of the magician at the moment of concentration, that the power of the higher force is actually guiding your hand and instrument to draw the circle. So before drawing the circle, a conscious contact with the higher force has to be brought about of actualized focus, identification. Those that are versed, having a thorough command of things in terms of the practical exercise of the first tarot card. As I've explained, this is the first level of initiation, the Soul card. It's card 0. You take that out of the equation, you don't even get out of the fucking gates. This is how we become fully conscious of our own spirit actualized in connection with that soul spark being ignited. And it has to be ignited again and again and again. You feel that surge surging through your body, right? It just explodes within your heart from time to time. That's the energy I'm talking about. This is what we want to be experiencing. And from here, it's not difficult to imagine the fact that the higher force exists, because it does. And for those that practice dark sorcery, God fucking damn it, what they do not possess is the necessary maturity it takes to actualize anything in this segment, and will never be able to draw the true circle of the magician. Again, I'm not down with Kabbalah, the Ari tree construct, or anything to do with those systems of inverted magic. You fuck with that shit, you're going to get keyed straight into the clip-off. And I don't care what anybody else says out there otherwise. Recognize the fact that there are more ancient and more pure traditions that did not come from this shit. Again, there is magic and systems that are far more ancient and far more pure in their essence than this very, very tiny sliver. The Ari tree construct and those grid works are pure fucking poison. That has everything to do with the Metatronics. But if you do things correctly and actualize the codex that is there within your core essence, the system of magic that I practice goes into the true universal tree of life. Realize that the effect of such a circle, when it's actually drawn correctly, it's everything to do with a grade of soil that your astro-psychological tree is planted in. The fortification of your imagination, which again is the imagination, and the force is moreover produced by the accumulation of the elements, condensation of the light code codex, and not that false cold light bullshit. All right, I'm talking about the true light of proper knowledge and wisdom. And it is wisdom that knows how to apply knowledge and context to these things to one's own existence and get the actual fucking results required in terms of the trajectory of what is meant to continue to unfold. We got to stop hitting the fucking ceiling. We got to stop hitting the triangulation. We got to make the breakthrough here. Otherwise, everything's just going to go in a circle that devours, and not the circle that expands onto the 3 spirals of creation. The consciousness of and contact with the all. Again, this has to be experienced legitimately. Legitimately experienced, okay? It is now up to you to make use of this. Again, though, in context of how all of this is going to work for you as the individual, if you have not been initiated into the mystery school, then this is what I'm going to encourage and will continue to encourage for those that haven't taken the first steps with me one-on-one. If you have, then all of this is going to reinforce things in terms of your personal path work and adding more power and connection to what the circle of the magician is really all about. You must never forget the main thing here. If you have reached the necessary cosmic contact by means of focus, mastering the states of meditation and mastering your imagination, you are going to be qualified and can really start taking things to a whole other level in terms of what all of this actually yields to you. Now, one of the absolute most powerful things that you can do within the fulcrum of the circle of the magician is throwing the fire letter codex. The fire letter codex gets into ancient languages that are there within the codex. Some so ancient that there's no way to decipher what's necessarily being spoken. In terms of divine tongues and the way that this is highly misused, it is important to note that this gift is very, very real. And when you're throwing the fire letter codex within the fulcrum of the circle of the magician, this is reinforcing the planetary shields and also the shields in your own existence in terms of being in alignment. And is also one of the most powerful things that one can do in terms of hyperdimensional warfare. This will inevitably slow the thought process down enough in order for you to throw frequency in terms of sound with your evocations. And it is the evocation springing forth like a wellspring from the depths of who you are that now starts to overflow within the fulcrum and the sphere, building up the energy necessary in its direct communication with the higher force itself. Now, it's easy to assume that all of this is not made available to certain individuals, when in fact it is. All you have to do is seek it. All you have to do is ask for that wellspring, the well of Urut, to come forth from within yourself. And it takes absolute surrender in terms of what I'm getting at in order for that fire to come forth. And when you throw the fire letter codex, this is the most powerful magical language that one could ever evoke. We can declare things in the tongue that we have been raised in. That's good and fine. But when you don't know necessarily what to evoke, when you don't know necessarily what to say, the eternal spirit that is within you is going to speak forth on your behalf in terms of the ego getting in the way and all of this other fucking shit that we deal with as humans. And again, all you have to do is seek it and know that this language that is there within you, within the codex, does exist. And when it springs forth and when you let go and when you allow yourself to evoke from this place, again, it's not one of the most powerful things in terms of hyperdimensional warfare, but it is absolutely one of the most powerful things in terms of healing and routing out all of the detritus and all of the fucking bullshit standing in the way of you being actualized in terms of your eternal core essence. If anybody out there wants to get a hold of me in terms of initiation, then send me an email at blackearthproductions@hotmail.com. Check out the website at blackearthproductions with a Z.com. Click on the services page, go through everything. Hit me up, everybody. And all of you that have been initiated and have been a part of this since the beginning, I am reaching out to all of you in order for this to continue. Where things stand right now in terms of what is unfolding in the reality field at the precession of the grand cycle of the great year, we are at the true gates that the ancients knew we would all be at. And there's a lot of pressure to cave in. There's a lot of pressure to assume that it's all fucking bullshit because certain things haven't manifested or whatever. And to that, No matter what we're dealing with as individuals, the things that have been revealed, there's too much confirmation otherwise. It might feel like it's hopeless, it might feel like there's no fucking point anymore, but that is a lie. As we continue to support one another. And so to that again, as I often say, Sethikus, Boza, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame, Healing Arts, and Occult Science. Be empowered, be encouraged, as we continue to support one another in terms of unity consciousness and get the breakthrough necessary that is meant to come for the birthright to unfold. Take these instructions. Go into your circle.